I didn't even realize how miserable I was because we become addicted to misery and pain. We find ways to be passionate about things that we aren't as a coping mechanism. We can scale up big mountains and do really big adventures physically. Yet it takes real courage to speak your truth and to live your truth. There's another type of mediumship that we don't really talk about, and affects a lot more people, especially with the awakening that the planet's gone through since 2012. And that's being a medium where you connect with high vibrational entities and beings, and you might be a channel for wisdom. And that kind of mediumship is where people start to speak inspirationally.
The episode you're about to watch has been republished. My podcast channel reaches a lot more people now, and there's certain episodes that have slipped under the radar, and I wanted to bring them up for your attention because I truly feel they are worth listening to. So please be sure to let me know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And of course, let's continue to connect. Let me know where you are in the world and where you're listening and tuning in from. I love reading it. It's amazing, isn't it, that we can do this? And the other thing I want to say as well is find out where we are if you want to put your spiritual boots on and come and join us at one of our 5-day retreats or one-day events around the world. Links are below as well if you want to find out more what we're up to. Much love from me. Enjoy. Sheila, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guy. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm genuinely very excited for this conversation today. And just to put a little bit of context into how this came about for people listening as well, because I have your book right here, Brave. And judging by the color, honestly, it's not the book I would pick up initially as a man, okay? But having met you and had a conversation, and you gifted the book to me to check it out, and we were just chatting, and I just knew you coming on the podcast as soon as I met you. I don't know what it was, and everything you do. Anyway, long story short, my wife clocked the book that was sitting on the coffee table, so she would start picking it up, and she's like, "Oh, this looks great. What's this?" And then she started reading it to Ava every evening, and I would be sitting there. So I was hearing the stories coming out as each chapter went by, and we're about a third of the way through, but I just wanted to let you know that. So it's actually had a real impact on our household. So I was very excited to have this conversation today because you've been on one hell of a journey, and I have no doubt you can inspire many people. So before we get into the book anyway, I always ask everyone, right now, if you were at an intimate dinner party and you sat next to a stranger and they asked you what you did for a living right now, what would you say?
Right now, I'd say I'm an author because I'm just become an author. I'm an author, I'm a transformation mentor, and I'm a medium. And how I do that, I think I'm a bit of a magician sometimes because I do really stand for transforming people's lives
Mm-hmm.
because I was stuck in mine for so long and I was miserable and I didn't even realize how miserable I was because we become addicted to misery and pain. We don't realize it. Well, I didn't anyway. And so, yeah, that's what I do. I'm a real advocate, passionate about transforming people's lives into the life they want, into the life they dream for.
Yeah, and it's definitely a courageous step to take that to I guess start owning it and moving forward. I'm always intrigued as well because I'm sure you'd get different reactions depending on the person sitting next to you when you say something like that. Especially the last word you mentioned, which was medium. And I'm open as like I love this work. I love exploring this. But what kind of reactions do you get from that when you say that now? Because I'm sure there was a part in your life where you weren't saying that, and now you are. So you've been on this transition yourself.
There was a part of my life I was completely hiding this part of myself. And I think there's a lot of maybe listeners here who have these abilities that are scared to talk about it, to own up to having them, to confused by them. So I had all those feelings for many years. And then I had my awakening. And so to answer your question, how do people react? Some people are just so intrigued by it because they believe in the other side. They may have had their own experiences with paranormal experiences or just experiences with spirits or ancestors, or signs and synchronicity from the universe. So they're like, oh, there's someone I can talk to about this who's not going to think I'm crazy. There's some people that are interested but probably sit on the fence and are just ask questions more pragmatically. And there are non-believers. And the non-believers, I'm okay with non-believers. My dad's a non-believer, so that's okay to be a non-believer. I always think just ask questions and get curious, and then at least you can have a good standpoint on something.
Yeah, beautiful. And how would you define mediumship, just to get clarity on it while we're on this class?
You know, I'm a medium who speaks to souls on the other side who have passed over, who had a human incarnation, um, for my clients. So these souls I speak to that have passed over have had a human form. That's one form of mediumship. And when I tune into that dimensional realm, it's a heavier realm as a medium. And we call ourselves evidential mediums because when you speak to the soul on the other side, you need evidence to prove, are you grandmother, grandfather, a name? What did you love? Describe your relationship with the client sitting in front of me. So it's called evidential mediumship. But there's another type of mediumship that we don't really talk about, and affects a lot more people, especially with the awakening that the planet's gone through since 2012, and a lot of people have had spiritual awakening since COVID, and that's being a medium where you connect with high vibrational entities and beings, and you might be a channel for wisdom. And that kind of mediumship is where people start to speak inspirationally. They start to do podcasts. They start to write books. They start to do, posts on Facebook, and you might have the experience of inspiration. So you're in spirit. You're connected to a spirit of a high vibration. So that kind of mediumship is just a high vibrational type of mediumship from a very high dimension. And there's a lot of angels, high vibrational light beings, interstellar beings. I'm getting a little weird now, so hopefully
That's okay.
are
It's a conversation. We can all nod our head in
We
agreement or
can.
not.
I used to be a finance director. We'll come to this. I've had a very credible part of my life, so it hasn't always been woo-woo. And so this type of mediumship, a lot more people have access to, and a word you could use for it is being an oracle. You're being an
Wow.
oracle for higher wisdom and guidance. And that we shouldn't shun from. That is true service. And a lot of mentors and coaches, healers are oracles from high vibrational beings.
That's something else. Now, I'm curious as well, and I think back in my own life as well, but did you have insight your whole life with this and just suppressed it? Or is this something through, because you mentioned awakening as well, that just started to come online from an awakening? What happened?
So I have one vivid memory when I was very young and I was crying. I was inconsolable, and the only reason why I remember this memory is because my dad didn't really hug us or hold our hands. And I have a memory where my mother and father were holding held a hand, my left hand and my right hand, and they were walking me around the house, and I couldn't stop crying. And it went for a long period of time, and my memory of that is I saw something in my room. I saw a spirit, and I was in overwhelm, and I was so scared. And it's a really common experience with a lot of the teachers, a lot of the students I teach, that they shut down after an
Mm.
experience like that. And so I shut down from my strong clairvoyance and seeing spirits from the age of about 3 or 4. However, I believe intuition always gets through the cracks. And so it's in my book, a couple of experiences I share where I've had such strong knowings. I've had premonitions and dreams, and it's got stronger as I've gotten older, and I've trusted it more. So the psychic, if you want to call it, or intuitive experiences I've had have always been there. It comes through perhaps in times of crisis. It comes through in times of elevated emotional states, deep grief, sadness, or euphoria, because I think in those states we're very present. And when we're very present, we can speak to our higher self. We can speak to our spirit guides. So I think intuition's always there. We vacillate in and out of that state.
Yeah. And you mentioned finance. Did you say finance director?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
So that
very
so
rational and logical part of my mind exists too, right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, because if I'm not mistaken, Sri Lankan's your background, is that correct? And were you born in Sri Lanka or
No, I was born
Australia?
in Sydney. My parents were born in Malaysia, and they had an arranged marriage. And my dad migrated to Australia in 1975. So my dad's a doctor, and my mother comes from a very intuitive line of women. So I feel like I'm a true product of two very different people.
Wow, amazing. And do you think how much affected you? So when you became a finance director, and I only saw this because obviously I work with a lot of people, and we get a lot of people getting to that point in their life, especially late 30s, early 40s, like, oh my God, what have I done with my life? I've been going this career path and it's not serving me, and everything starts to break down. When you were a finance director, did that at one point feel like your calling and you were actually loving it, or was there always a push to get you in that direction or expectation from other people? I don't know.
Truthfully, it didn't feel like a calling, but it served me.
Okay.
And I know it wasn't a calling because I wasn't passionate about it. And a lot of women, and this is why I wrote my book, because we find ways to be passionate about things that we aren't as a coping mechanism. So I convinced myself the money was important, the job title was important. I found an industry that I was aligned with, but fundamentally, following this path, and I did an MBA and I got to the C-suite as a finance director. And fundamentally, I was
Wow.
walking my father's path, or a path conditioned by my culture, which was you don't enjoy your career, you just become very successful. And I chose a career where I got a scholarship to university. I didn't, and because I got a scholarship, I just chose that degree. I didn't think, gosh, what would make my heart sing? What would
Mm.
I love to do? And the only reason, even if I asked myself those questions all those years ago, Guy, I don't even think I could have answered it. And I think it's a real failing of that education system so many years ago, was that I didn't know myself. And so I love what I'm seeing now with the youthful generation coming through, raised by conscious parents that are helping the children find their way home to themselves, because I didn't have that. So for me, I had a career path that was not my own path. I walked my culture's path, my family's path, society, my friends around me were all very successful. When you're successful, you surround yourself by other successful people. And before you know it, there's groupthink. You're all thinking the same, right? And there's an abandoning of yourself in that process just to belong. We all want to belong.
Mm.
And so I belonged with these different tribes for many years. And then I got lost. And I talk about it in my book in the chapter called The Dark Night of Courage, because I personally believe when we lose ourselves enough, the universe does a big course correction and it manifests as a crisis.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree with that. So who you were a finance director for? Because you mentioned that you were kind of in alignment, but not in the
Yeah,
roles
so,
that you were
so I
doing.
found an industry I loved. I worked in publishing for many years. So I was a finance director at Simon & Schuster. And then I was a deputy finance director for a different publishing house. So the universe helped me along to bring me slowly in alignment with where I was going, which would be eventually to write a book. I was a bit of a
Amazing.
shadow artist. I was surrounded by all these authors, wishing I could be one myself secretly. So I write about it in the second chapter of my book, that quite often all the crumbs in our life add up to make sense later. And so we kind of, you might ask me, was I doing my calling? Perhaps in some way I was being guided to finally end up doing work that was very much in line with my purpose. And perhaps for many years I was just training.
Yeah, wow. There's a lot to be said about that, isn't it? I always remember reading Richard Branson's original autobiography when I was going through my own transition, because he's such a great guy. But he always talked about as well, and I think Tony Robbins, about proximity and being in the areas that you love, and not necessarily doing the very thing, but that proximity itself is going to have major impact over time, which sounds like it's happening. So for you then, if you're in that proximity, you're kind of in alignment. When did the cracks start appearing, going, and your soul self wanting to come through more, or you knew that the changes were coming?
Yeah, so the changes happened far before the actual, I think, formal awakening. And, I was a perfectionist.
Oh,
So whatever the thing you are that doesn't serve you, that will be the source of the crisis. So I was a perfectionist, and I opened my book with this chapter where I was working in a publishing house and 50 Shades of Grey was being published. This was a book that had great visibility. It was a book that globally was in the media every day for weeks on end. We sold 120 million copies.
that's
It's one of the
insane.
best-selling books of all time. And I was working at Random House Publishing at that time, and I was responsible for stock management.
Huh.
So we this is something we don't want to get wrong, and for some reason in Australia, we were really selling a lot of copies of this book per capita. And so we couldn't afford to run out of stock. It would take 2 months to get stock to a port in Sydney from overseas. And so we were working on very difficult lead times. And I remember sitting with the sales director trying to forecast something that was an outlier. It was a freak of nature, right? And we forecasted to bring in a significant quantity on a ship. A week later, we'd get the sales data through to indicate to us what the trends were. And a week later, I opened this file and the sales are stopped dead. They just slowed down to kind of a halt because we'd saturated the whole Australian market with this book,
Wow.
right? So I'm a perfectionist and I was like, what? How did I get this wrong? This is humiliating. I don't make mistakes. What will everyone think? And it began the journey of shame, humiliation, anxiety, depression. And that was for me a big crisis point where I'd invested everything into my career at that point. I just finished my MBA and my job title and my status meant so much to me. And I'd abandoned myself, my personal life, romantic relationships, the things that I loved.
Mm.
And so my career started to dismantle the one thing I held up as very important. And this was the beginning of my spiritual awakening.
Wow. And were you getting a hard time from the company as well, or were you just giving yourself a hard time?
It's reasonable that a company in that situation would ask difficult questions, right? But when you don't have, and I didn't have a balanced mindset about myself. So I saw everything as a crisis. I saw every question and email as I'm a terrible person. I'm bad. I had that kind of very linear line of thinking. So definitely there was, questions. An error had been made, but what's wrong with errors? What's wrong with mistakes?
Totally.
Even if they're big, right? But when you're a perfectionist, it takes you out of life. So I then had to go on a journey to get myself out of that, of self-inquiry, and then the universe created some big changes in my life, job changes, job losses, relationships ending, and then very shortly after that, I actually started, I guess I'd already been on my spiritual path for a couple of years studying Buddhism, but I have found a guru in India and had a guru for 2 years after that moment, where I
Wow.
started to I started to learn Vedic philosophy, the mind, the goodness of the mind. I started to learn what the art of detachment is, the karmic impact of our thoughts. It was an initiation into spirituality, and I was forced into it. I was searching,
Yeah.
for answers.
Yeah, totally. So how long did that period start to happen? So you said the straw broke the camel's back with that maneuver, and I remember Linda reading that part out loud in the book. I was like, wow, that's incredible. Even the whole experience with 50 Shades of Grey, because like you said, it's such a anomaly. Like how
It
the
was
hell?
so visible, yeah. The world was celebrating the success of this book, and yet I, behind closed doors, was having a crisis about it. It was a
Yeah,
real
wow.
polarity of experiences.
Yeah. So once that started to happen and you start to do fall into these places, depression, anxiety, and this shame. I mean, there's such a strong and awful, not, I shouldn't say awful, but it's an emotion that's difficult to deal with when it's happening. You know, D- was your perfectionist brain at that time, which is I'm curious about, like, oh right, I've got to figure out a way to make this happen, or were you willing to then slowly just start to let go of the control of what you'd sounded like you'd been governing in your life to that
No, I
stage?
mean, I needed assistance because the same mind that got me into this problem wasn't able to get me out. I needed a whole set of new tools, like mindset mastery tools, emotional resilience tools, spiritual tools to allow me to connect back to myself, source and intuition. So it wasn't a quick process. It was a process where I started to work with a therapist, counselors,
Right.
mentors. I
Yeah.
started to literally go in and start read spiritual books, Eckhart Tolle, The
Yeah.
Power of Now. Like they all became my teachers in a very short space of time. I did leave that job, and it was the right thing to do to be exited from that job. And that gained another painful experience. But looking back now, it was all perfect because
Mm.
all of these experiences that I was in were no longer in alignment with where I was going.
It's incredible, when to have that wisdom looking back. And what I'm curious about as well is, when did the mediumship aspect start to come into to play with all this?
So it was several years later, and by that stage, I was in a romantic relationship. And I think this resonates with a lot of women and men too, where I'd self-sacrificed myself so much in this relationship. This was a relationship where my partner at that time had a guru in India. So he was following the guru and I was running after him. So it was one of those kind of comical. He was running after the guru and I was running after him. And it's like, who's running after me? So, and this story is in the book too. That relationship ended because it was not serving me.
Right.
And that, because of that relationship ending, I'd become part of all his spiritual groups. I'd self-sacrifice all of my thoughts and got so into his world where I'd abandoned myself. So after that breakup, I started to do a whole lot of workshops, and I started to seek and search again. I did a workshop on intuition, and in that workshop, I had probably my first formal spiritual experience where the teacher took us into a meditation. And I'm naturally very psychic. I come from a very psychic family. So in the first workshop, I gave a reading for the lady. She's like, oh my God, all of this is true. And then I said, I think I've got someone here. I think it's an uncle. He was in the Navy. She's like, that's my uncle. So I described him very accurately. And then I didn't realize there was a difference between being a psychic and a medium. So I came into all this knowledge very quickly. It felt like a spontaneous awakening. However, it's just I had a teacher show me how to use these gifts, these abilities. I had them all the time. And I recall in that moment when she said to me, you're a medium and you have these abilities. Guy, there was this feeling of I've arrived. Like this is the thing I was
Wow.
looking for my whole life. And I thought I arrived at the end. That was actually the beginning of I arrived at the beginning of a new path, but it was it become the big path that I had to step into.
Amazing. And when you realized you arrived, and I can speak on my own slightly experience here, because I'm always curious then with everyone's journey, because there was a moment where I was still in my old world, which was my last company, 180 Nutrition, and I was going to bed every single night because I was doing this work more and more and more, having more and more awakenings. And there was this massive pull to be doing what I'm doing now. Now, with the hindsight of 5 years, looking back when I was in that soup, I can see it, but at the time I couldn't see it. I'm like, how the hell am I going to get this work out there? Or this, there was this huge resistance, but it just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Is that what was happening for you? And did you resist when you went, shit, I've arrived? Was it a moment of like, oh fuck, I'm going to put myself out there like this now? Or did you just run with it and
No,
carry
I
on?
hid. I hid from the world for another 3 or 4 years.
There you go.
Then
Okay.
then another strong dark, and that's when the Dark Night of Courage, which is in the book, happened because
Oh, we
I
haven't got to the
went.
Dark Night of Courage
We
yet.
haven't even got to the Dark Night. I mean,
Oh,
there's definitely been crisis, but the Dark Night is a proper. There's shades of the Dark Knight. There's 50 shades of the Dark Knight, if we can describe it that way. I immerse myself in every workshop that I could get my hands on to study psychic development, intuitive development.
wow.
And I went to the Arthur Finlay College 3 times in 18 months. And the Arthur Finlay College is a college in the UK dedicated to the pursuit of the studies of mediumship. It was founded by John Arthur Finlay. And for it's week-long courses, and you go there, and from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., you are channeling dead people. It's a structured course.
Wow.
I remember arriving in London. It was cold at night. It was cold, and I ran up with my suitcases with the cobbled stones, and I burst open the doors and I said, "Is this the college? I'm here. I'm here." And these 2 prim proper English ladies said, "Yes, you're here. Can you close the door?" Because I couldn't believe that I'd finally made it to this magical, mystical place. A lot of us call it Hogwarts because it is like Hogwarts College. And we sit in rooms and it's a big castle, and we literally do exercises with the tutors, and it's different levels. You get put in a class ranked by your ability. And I went there 3 times because, it's such an immersive learning
Boot camp.
experience.
Yeah.
It's like boot camp. I just finished an MBA. I was like, I need to find where the MBAs of the mediumship world are, and this is the college for it. So I studied, and after the first time I came back from the college, I got back to my job at that time, and I said a mantra every day, and I was manifesting. And when I got back to Sydney, I'd sit at my computer, I'd turn on my computer, and I'd say to myself, I hate this job. I wish I didn't have it. I hate this job. I wish I didn't have it. And so 5 weeks later, I was exited from that job. That's not the whole Dark Night of Courage story, but
Were you devastated when they exited you from that job?
by that stage, I'd had a couple of spiritual mentors where I was, absolutely. My ego was crushed.
Oh, okay.
I was back into this like terror, but not like the other times. This time I was conscious and I knew I was being saved. And I knew it was a sign from the universe. And so with my spiritual teacher, she goes, "You're ready to work now. It's time to start working as a medium." So the universe took the job away. I had no desire to return at that point in time to my corporate job. And I got busy. I set a website up. I mean, this is way before social media. It's years ago. I set a website up, and Facebook was around, but I just started to do little posts. Instagram wasn't around back then, and I literally just started to say, that was the first time I came out of the spiritual closet. And I remember doing a post on Facebook, and I went to bed, and I thought I'm going to wake up, and I couldn't sleep that night because I thought I'd get trolled. I thought, because no one knew about this part of me. I just finished my MBA. I was a finance person. I'd hidden this 100%. And the universe was like, no more hiding, no more.
Wow.
So I had to start to work. That was the beginning.
That was the beginning. And at what point on that journey were you like 100% in, like you feel comfortable in every, because meeting you now, you just ooze this stuff. Like you would never know this journey in a million years that you've been on, because it's just you. When I met you, like it's just, beaming out of every pore of you, like, so at what point do you think on that journey then could you really own it?
I don't know if there's any points. There's a lot of books that are called Becoming, like even Michelle Obama, I'm pretty sure her book's called Becoming. I became this. And so every step of the way, I just became more of this version of me and less of the old version of me. So, after I lost my job and set up this business to work as a medium, my first mentor reached out to me and she said, "I think you're ready to go on psychic TV to do live readings on Australian television." And I thought,
wow.
"You're mad. There's no way I'm doing this." She goes, "No, you're ready and you'd be perfect." So I said, "Okay, put me forward," thinking they'd say no, or it's 6 months away. And then she messaged me back and said, "You're on in 2 weeks on Saturday night." So I was like, "What are you talking about?" So, I went away. I panicked. Yes. I also said yes with her strong mentor encouragement. Then I got prepared, right? So fear can hold us back, but fear can also be a sign of where we're not ready. And I was like, I'm not ready to appear on television. So I found a lady who could train me how to speak to camera. I was scared I wouldn't be able to channel on live television, that the red light might throw me. So I said to her, she told me the price to train with her. And I said, I can't afford that. But I said, how about this? I'll pay you half the price and I'll give you free readings to you and everyone in your office. You just got to tell me if I'm accurate or not. And she said to me, that's an unusual offer, but I'm going to take it. Right? So you got to get innovative.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 weeks later, I was there in the studio. Was I nervous? Yes. Did I feel more prepared because I'd put myself forward and been proactive? Yes. And then at that point, there was more of me becoming a public medium on television. That was the next step. And then after that, so many other doors have opened where I've just become more and more, me. I've become more and more into my power as a medium, as a psychic, as a transformation coach, even being an author. That was becoming. I'd never written a blog post and I quit my job to write a book.
Yeah.
So,
incredible. Do we all have this ability to become psychic medium? Do you think?
I think we absolutely all have the ability we all have psychic ability. And psychic's a strong word and quite charged because of the history of psychics, right? And the religious incompatibilities perhaps around that word. So I like to use the word intuition, which is literally just another form of it.
Yeah.
And we absolutely all have intuition. And we absolutely all have an ability to channel from higher source. And we can all do that once we just clear out our limiting beliefs. And we just and when I work with clients, we clear the beliefs and then we literally change our life. So we start heading and facing a new direction. I won't say the right direction. It's just a new direction. And the direction is in alignment with our intuition.
Yeah, no, it's massive, isn't it? And from what I can feel and see then as well, and I'm just thinking of the listener at this moment, because I think of the boot camp that you went back 3 times in that. So it's obviously a skill as well. Once you clear the limiting beliefs, then there needs to be a practice around it to allow our skills to develop. So we tune in more.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I teach this. So there's different types of clairs. Clair is a French word for clear, and clairvoyance is clear seeing. So clear seeing through the third eye, and there's hearing, feeling, and just the knowing. And then you have taste and smell as well, right? Psychic intuitive skills. So I dissect down these abilities and take people through practices where they can supercharge how they use this. So I run a course on that. However, if you're at home and you just want to get a little bit more psychic, having a daily meditation practice is essential.
Mm.
Sitting in the same place and meditating every day also creates more of a portal and supercharges that space. So when you come into that, it's a still space. And so it amplifies the practice, it magnifies. It's like when you go into a church or a temple or a monastery, it feels still, doesn't it? Just feels still. You don't know why, because everyone sits there every day in stillness. And that's why when you go into the city, you're like, oh, I just feel so thrown, or I just feel tired, because in a city, everyone's busy and thinking. So you've got to create a space consciously. Journal writing every morning after you meditate is connecting with something higher than yourself. And you just do that practice every day with sounds around you. Sounds clear the air, high vibrational music. And these days, years ago, you could not Google high vibrational music. It just wouldn't have, nothing would have come up when I first started meditating. But now in Spotify, Google high vibrational music, Google the frequencies and hertz that will activate the gamma brainwaves, take you out of, the frenetic busyness. There's so many tools now. My counsel is, don't be concerned about being psychic. Be more interested in being still and clearing and cleaning yourself. And the last thing I say is connect to nature as frequently as you can. Dip yourself in the ocean to cleanse your auric field. Sit and have lunch in nature if you can. Have your breaks in nature. And those tools inevitably will lead you to your intuition.
Yeah, massive. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing all that. And just something occurred to me, but when you're out and about and you develop these skills, are you like just tuning into people all the time unconsciously and sort of getting a beat straight away, or is this something you settle yourself in? How much of it is interplaying in your life now on a daily basis?
Yeah, I teach this as well, because boundaries is really important. You can get
Mm.
psychically hit by so many things around you. So I don't open myself to do readings or to psychically read somebody, because I think there's a boundary that everyone has. I don't think everyone wants to be read. Not everyone wants psychic guidance or advice. So I don't personally do that. However, as someone who's quite sensitive and open, I find I get feelings about people, and I think most people get feelings.
Mm.
And, Guy, you had a feeling about me when we met at that ice bath all those weeks ago. You were like, be on my podcast. So your intuition was saying something to you, right? So you
Yeah.
got a hit, and we all get hits. When someone's in grief, or someone's got a big personality or a big aura or energy, I'm more conscious to not feel into their energy and respectfully come to understand who they are through,
Yeah.
conversation, being interested in them.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Now, regarding your book, Brave, which I've got here, Courageously Live Your Truth, at what moment did you decide to go, you know what, I've got to get a book out, and why the framework of this book? I know, because it's a little bit different as well, because you collectively draw different women's experiences in. So what was the thinking behind it and the inspiration?
Yeah, look, and I think that's where our life makes sense only years later. So I worked in publishing for many years, and I read so many books, so many self-improvement books. And there's so many of the teachers in these books helped me in life. And I thought, how do I make this book that kind of book for the reader, where there's so much wisdom? And that's why there's a lot of quotes, and each chapter begins with a quote, because I wanted the vibration of that teacher in the book too, because books have a vibration. So I wanted to take the reader on a path. So, and I wanted to take the reader through difficulty into triumph. I've interviewed 19 other women for the book because I knew my own story wasn't everyone's experience. Not everyone can get what it's like to be a medium or psychic, but they get what it's like to not feel like you don't belong, right? So there was relatability to my story. A lot of corporate women are having awakenings. So I thought that's relatable. But there's 19 other women that are mums, that are much older than me, that are much younger than me, that have had different experiences. So it's packed with a lot of wisdom because I wanted people to walk away and go, yes, I know what to do now. I know how to step forward. And I converted my whole and any writers out there, you'll be converting one room to a writing den. I had walls covered in Post-it notes. My floor was strewn with paper, and I think this is really common. I've spoken to so many authors at book launches over the years, and it's just so messy before it becomes clear. And that's why I respect when people make it to the end of a book, because we can all start writing and then we can all write a chapter or two. But at that point, that's when the heat hits, and you're like, what exactly am I trying to do? How am I doing it? And why? And I had to really answer these questions. And so I got an editor. I started to work early on with an editor because I had no skills. So like all the coaches say, find someone that knows more about this process than you. So I quickly was like, I need a really good editor. And I was very lucky. The universe delivers, the right person. My editor had done a PhD in, I think it was mythical studies or something. So she was also interested in spirituality and was a book editor. So we talked for hours on end about, what am I trying to say? How do I say it? How do I make my message relatable? So I learned so much from the process. And, I wrote the book for myself 10 years ago, which this is the book I needed when I was having my spiritual awakening and my crisis.
Yeah.
We write the book for ourselves. It's the medicine for ourselves before it is for the world.
Yeah. And how long did it, if you think back now from first concept to when is it being released? Is it out now?
It's out now. It's in all good bookstores now. It's published in May, in the UK at the end of May, and in the US in September.
Congrats. That's huge. It's amazing. Like, how long did that concept take then from start to finish?
I started writing this at the end of 2017. So I was one of those part-time writers that wrote after I got home from work and on the weekends, and where I could get a bit of time here and there. And then, like you say, Guy, the calling got stronger and stronger. And then I was like, I need to really dedicate time. So I stopped doing as much client work. And then finally, I quit my corporate job the year before COVID. And I had COVID before everyone had COVID. I bunkered down in my apartment alone and just wrote this book for like 6-7 months. I still had client work, but I spent long days just sitting, looking out the window, just being a writer.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. All I can say is congratulations. I've had many, as you can imagine, many authors I've spoken to over the years that come on the show, and I'm always just, it just blows me away that putting the book together, because it's something I know I've spoken to you about in my own journey about at one stage in my life putting it together, but before starting it, I always feel so huge. It's like, whoa, and getting clear and taking the steps to do that. I guess anything in life, it's a great lesson, and being followed through. One question I got for you with the book, and because was it a moment of where you ever thought you were never going to complete it? Because quite often when we're in projects or in that transformative change, sometimes there's a willingness, there's a part of us that starts to kick in and go, I'm going to give this up, or whatever that might be.
Oh, absolutely. There was a part, I don't know if I wasn't going to finish it. There was a moment of, I don't know if I've got what it takes to complete this project in the way I want. And then when I did all the chapters and finally gave it to the publisher, then probably the bigger thought for me was, is this the best I can do? Is this actually what I want out there? So for me, they say get your first draft done fast, and I give this counsel to anyone I mentor: just get your first draft done, because then you've written a book. And for me, the really hard work began when I went to I did about 5 or 6 edits, and then I had to reread, and I've written 72,000 words. You've got to read 72,000 words 5 or 6 times. with a critical eye,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
really understand. And you write things, you go, why did I write that? That doesn't even make sense. Or why did I write that? I don't quite agree. Or why did I write that? There's actually another opinion I've left out. So it's like I said, maybe working with clay, you've got to then massage it after, and that's the work.
And the last question on the book, the title, Brave, love it, right? One word, boom, and you know exactly what it's about. Was that something you wrote around, or did the title come towards the end?
It's interesting with book titles. 'Cause I worked in publishing for so long. If you don't we spend a lot of time in the publishing industry nailing the title and nailing the cover, because that's got to communicate so much to the reader that they pick it up. Originally, it was called Be Courageously You. It was called Be Courageously You. And I was very wedded to the title. And the publisher and I fought about it for a long time. And the publisher said, we're going to decide the title and you have to be okay with that. Leave it with me. So I didn't hear back from them for 2 weeks. And I checked my emails every day going, then have they thought of the title? And she came back with Brave Heart. And I just thought, it didn't resonate. And then and then I thought, no, it's actually just brave. It's just one, So it was actually, again, it was a collective group that came up with that word. And looking back now, maybe it's like when you name a child, you go, that name's perfect for the child.
Yeah,
It's like, this name's perfect for the book,
Yeah, it must feel like that, totally. Yeah, I can think about that with Ava, actually. Look back. No, yeah, it works, actually. It's landed. But before it was like a zillion names that came through on the whole thing. Yeah, look, I ask everyone questions on the show, and I'm always curious to get a different angle on you. And the first question is, with all this work that you do now, do you have any rituals or morning routines or things in place that keep you honest, sharp?
Yeah. Great question. There's a great book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and I recommend everyone read that. Because if you have a miracle morning, then you create a miracle life. And for me, it's still a work in progress. I think for everyone, because we're always in transition, right? So right now, I try and connect with the ocean daily, and if when discipline's really strong, I'll wake up and I'll go for a run on the beach and have a dip in the ocean. I meditate in the mornings. I start my morning with lemon water or a green juice. And I love just to sit in silence and write. And there's many different ways you can write. I got a friend that calls it morning pages, and he just writes 3 pages. And he says, it doesn't matter what I write, I just make sure I get 3 pages out every morning. So sometimes I'll just do that. Sometimes I'll do a gratitude, like 10 gratitudes. So I'm quite a dynamic person. So I don't start my day the same way every day, but I have probably a bit of a rhythm through 7 days.
Yeah, fair enough. I know that feeling. What's one thing most people wouldn't know about you?
Gosh, I'm such an open book. That's a great question.
You are.
I'm such an I'll tell you this one. Yeah, I can be very introverted and a hermit.
Okay.
People don't realize I'm actually, and even in human design, I'm a line 2. So I hide from the world for days and hours and even a week if I could, and I'd like no one to talk to me.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be obvious to people. That's not, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. If you were going to have dinner with anyone from any time frame, anywhere in the world, who do you think it would be and why? Is there anyone burning you'd like to have met or meet?
It's like, I'd love Nina Simone. I'd like to have conversations with people that have been through a lot. As a Black woman, she's a singer. She was so accomplished. She was actually a highly accomplished musician. She was trained like classical piano, and she lives in a very white world, and a Black woman that wasn't accepted, and yet rose to different types of fame. And she lost a fortune and made it. She hated men and loved men, and I just think women like that. Maya Angelou's another one. Just to sit and hear them tell stories.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'd say much. I'd just be like, tell me stories after stories of your life, and maybe the stories that you never wrote about or the ones you wish you did.
Totally. Yeah, no, brilliant. And last question, with everything we've covered today, What would you like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
Just, the message from my book, which is courageously live your truth, and I get emotional as I even talk about this because, we can scale up big mountains and do really big adventures physically. Yet it takes real courage to speak your truth and to live your truth. And it's a very simple concept, so simple that we sometimes don't even stop to think about it. Yet it's probably one of the most difficult things you can do is to constantly live your life in integrity to yourself. So my message to you is how can you do that today for yourself? What's one thought and action you can take today to just bring you a little bit more in alignment with you, what you love, who you want to be, what you are creating for your future. So that's what I'd love to leave the listener with.
Yeah, beautiful. That's so true. And what's next for you? What's coming up? I mean, you've released the book. Is it now? What happens from here?
Look, it's been a crazy wild ride for anyone that's ever. I walked into Big W and they had them all stacked up, and I'm about to go into Dimmicks and check out. When you see, I walked in during the week and my book was above Eckhart Tolle's book, and I was like, no way, I'm on the bookshelf above him. So what's next? I think writing this crazy wild ride. I'm writing an affirmation deck. For my publishers asked me for. They said we want another proposal, which is fantastic. So I'm going to do an affirmation oracle deck. And I'm pondering, and I'm going to have to spend some time in nature because I'd like to write a second book. And I'm just not sure what that is. And truthfully, Guy, I'm a little hesitant because I know I'm going to have to live the book to write it.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, what do I want to live? It might be about love. It might be about, high, I wouldn't call it high performance, but it's just like what is living the most expanded version of yourself look like? What are the tools? And so I think I'm going to write a book that I want to learn. I want to learn something first and then write about it, I think. So that's
Wow.
what's on the cards.
There's no stopping you, which is
No.
amazing. That's amazing. And look, congratulations, Sheila, and I wish you nothing but the best for this book. It's been awesome what we've read so far, and I'm a man saying that, and I know with the pink cover you're kind of targeting women, but still, I was drawn straight in. So yeah, I have no doubt it's going to be a huge success. And yeah, thank you for all that you do, and living your truth and being on the
Thank you,
show
Guy.
today.
Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome. Thank you.